My name is Roger Buck, and today I'll be talking about theosophy, Madame Blavatsky, whom we've spoken about in earlier episodes, but very briefly. Uh, Madame Helena P. Blavatsky was a 19th century Russian who came to America in the 1870s to found theosophy, where she also joined an American Masonic brotherhood. And as I've said before, brotherhood is significant here because back then, Masons generally, with very rare exceptions, were brothers. They were men. So it was very unusual for a Masonic brotherhood to welcome Blavatsky. And out of all of this emerged the sort of vast esoteric system of theosophy. Now, as I've also explained, for a good 20 years of my life, I was absolutely, totally steeped in theosophy. Theosophy has a variant that was founded by Alice Bailey later on in New York, actually. And this thinking, this theosophy of Alice Bailey was very, very key, although that's not always mentioned that much, to the origins of the Findhorn community, where I was also a member. I've spoken about that in previous episodes, and maybe we'll just say a little digression here. I began to move out of all of that through very much the help of Valentin Tomberg, but also, it has to be said as well, Rudolf Steiner. This is a digression, but it's maybe worth mentioning that Steiner was also a theosophist for a while. But he always claimed that the only reason he became a theosophist was that he hoped that it was possible to Christianize theosophy. I'll just say briefly, I am digressing, but I've recently been revisiting some of Steiner's lectures at that time, that he was still a theosophy, his lectures on the gospel, and I have to say it's very clear there. He is speaking about things that are so different from Blavatsky. Whatever problems there are with Steiner, and we're not trying to deny that there are problems there with Steiner, these gospel lectures, while Steiner's still a theosophist, shine with the most incredible reverence for Christ's deed on Calvary. He's clearly, I take Steiner very seriously on this, that his only reason for being a theosophist was, what some people will find the very strange aspiration that theosophy could be Christianized. But as I say, this is really like a digression from the main theme here. So, what is this episode about? Well, I'll say first of all that it's coming in two parts. Later on, there will be a second part, very different from the first, which will really be more of a personal update. There will be a few of my regular viewers and listeners who are possibly wondering what on earth has happened to me lately. And those of you who are maybe interested in that, you may want to wait till the second part where I just intend to go into some personal things. That's just for a few of you, just in case a few of you are interested. But the main part of this episode, I'll also be explaining, by the way, why there's no camera this time. But anyway, in terms of the first and major part of this, we are going to obviously be with the question raised by the title of this episode, which I think is going to be something like, is Madame Blavatsky the mother of modern spirituality, as some people are claiming? And this also, of course, begs the question of what do people mean by modern spirituality? Well, we're coming to that. I'll also say that what I'm doing in this first part is reading a post that I have going up on Substack. Maybe it'll already be up by the time you hear this. That's part of what we're doing here. And this post also features an extract from one of my books. But without saying more, I think I read you now the Substack post with the extract from my book, and then there'll be a bit more to say after that as well. So here we go, my Substack post. Recently, I have called attention to the enormous impact of theosophy on the West, that Eastern esoteric stream originally pioneered by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky in America, and continuing through Alice Bailey's efforts to give her efforts a superficial, quote-unquote, Christian and Western gloss. From here, its influence radiated out through countless New Age endeavors, whether these be well-known efforts, such as those of the Findhorn community, or say Oprah Winfrey, Eckhart Tolle, or countless lesser-known projects, often taking place behind the scenes. Alas, New Age spirituality is poorly understood by most folk, and yet New Ageism has become so mainstream these days that some even dare to call it, quote-unquote, modern spirituality, as though no other form of spirituality were appropriate to our new millennium. Now, one such person is Gary Lachman, author of numerous books on esoteric subjects, as well as being an original member of the rock group Blondie. Lachman is also the author of a biography of Blavatsky, and it's called Madame Blavatsky, the Mother of Modern Spirituality. And here Gary Lachman writes, so this is Lachman, although she died more than a century ago, Blavatsky's name still turns up in serious discussions about ancient wisdom, secret teachings, and inner knowledge. And it is generally agreed that her Theosophical Society was more or less the official starting point of the modern spiritual revival. By modern spiritual revival, I mean our contemporary widespread interest in a direct, immediate knowledge and experience of spiritual reality, and in a more profound relationship to the cosmos than traditional religions can provide. So yep, that's Lachman. Now it's me again commenting on Lachman. This modern so-called, this quote-unquote modern spiritual revival Lachman invokes here is nothing other than New Ageism, with all its dogmatic certainty that it offers, quote-unquote, more direct, profound roots to truth than any religious tradition. Or, as Lachman goes on to say in the book, quote-unquote, a sense of meaning and purpose that the official organs can no longer supply. Lachman's breezy dismissiveness is all too characteristic of the New Age scene, which is so very convinced of not only lack of meaning and purpose in Catholicism, but indeed all the old quote-unquote official religions, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Sikhism, and so on. Maybe I'm going to interject here. Just key thing in the whole New Age movement, just this utter, certainty that, the New Age, or whatever you want to call it, holistic spirituality, modern spirituality, this is the way to the truth. And all these old religions, they can't provide anything. They don't give us a relationship to the cosmos, as he's putting it. The official organs, the official religions can no longer supply this. Now we're in need of so-called modern spirituality. So anyway, I continue with my Substack post. To be fair to Lachman, he does not identify himself as a New Ager, but then few people in this scene do these days. Yet, passages like this one make all too clear that his quote-unquote modern spirituality term is merely another term for what used to be called New Age. So I'm going to read Lachman again here, another passage, and I'll just note that he's speaking here of HPB, because Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, people called her HPB. They still call her HPB today. So anyway, here again is more from Blavatsky on the mother of modern spirituality, so-called. So here's Lachman. If Blavatsky's offering to our modern spiritual consciousness was to be suddenly removed, it would drag along with it practically everything we associate with the very notion of modern spirituality. To press my point, Enlightenment saying, anyone who meditates or is interested in reincarnation or has thought about karma or pursues higher consciousness or has wondered about Atlantis or thinks the ancients might have known a few things that we don't, or reads about esotericism, or frequents an alternative health center or food shop, would be aware of it if modern spirituality somehow became HPB free. And this, of course, would include quite a few people who never heard of Blavatsky or who have only the vaguest idea of what theosophy is or of its place in the history of Western consciousness, which is to say, most people. It's been said that all of modern Russian literature emerged from Nikolai Gogol's short story, The Overcoat. It can equally be said that practically all modern occultism and esotericism emerged from the ample bosom of his younger countrywoman and contemporary HPB. And so, back to me, I invoke Lachman, for even if I severely question his appellation, modern spirituality, he is indeed right to identify Helena P. Blavatsky as the mother of all this. I'm just going to make another interjection here. For those of you who know Tomberg, those of you who really know Tomberg's works, his late Catholic works, and know all the things he's saying there about Blavatsky, all the links he's making, to the serpent. I'm hardly mentioning Tomberg in this piece, but Tomberg is implicit in all of this. And if you have any doubt about what I'm saying there, saying that Tomberg is implicit in everything I'm saying here, you might want to look at a video I have on the channel called Eastern Occultism Without Christ. And there, that not only references, I believe, Tomberg's various references to theosophy in his work, but also private correspondence about the origins of the New Age movement. But I will keep with the text now. Again, though, many folk, including Christians and Catholics, hardly grasp such things. They easily miss the New Age wood for all the bewildering trees. One of my ongoing projects, then, is to try to foster clarity about this wood, for it is not simply a wood, but a mighty, growing forest, spreading everywhere, at least everywhere, in the Anglo-American world. I'm going to make another interjection from my text. I speak about one of my ongoing projects. It seems to me, as I look out at whatever remaining years I have in my life, that there are a number of projects that I need to do with my life. This is one of them. Yes, fostering clarity about this mighty, growing forest spreading everywhere. But I have other projects as well, which is what this channel is about. Some of those are to do with, Valentin Tomberg. Other projects include, what I have to say about Catholic tradition and the Latin Mass. Another project I have very much, close to my heart is Ireland. And then there's a greater project going on around Europe. And very much what Hilaire Belloc called Europe and the Faith. So that's just a little clarification there as to what this channel is all about. It's about a way for me to express and work with these projects, and my books are the same thing. But anyway, let's continue with the Substack post. This project is ongoing, expressing itself through my videos and books. And today, I want to offer a very key extract, perhaps the key extract, from my most recent book, The Gentle Traditionalist Returns, which very much concerns the New Age, or so-called modern spirituality. Now, as I have also explained at Substack, my Gentle Traditionalist books appear to be novels, but they are curious novels, as in fact remarkably little happens in them in terms of action or plot. Rather, these books are mainly dialogues about ideas. And in this, again, most key extract, I offer a dialogue about the New Age, about so-called modern spirituality. The dialogue is primarily between the Gentle Traditionalist, designated as GT, and a New Age leader, Gareth Lightshadow, designated as GLS. My aim in these dialogues was to present complex topics in an easy-to-read, accessible format. I will not say too much more of the dialogue that follows, except that I very much hope it succeeds in this aim, for it is terribly important that people understand the forces behind the New Age movement, forces which, as I have suggested elsewhere, are aiming at nothing less than the occult replacement of Christianity in the West. Okay, I am about to read the dialogue. I'll just say before that, as I say, I'm speaking about these things elsewhere. Elsewhere I have, for example, a video on this channel called The Occult Replacement of Christianity in the West. And what I think and what I hope is that it's maybe helpful to come at these things from different angles. So, you can photograph a tree, you could lie, underneath a tree and photograph it from the ground, and you'd be looking up at the branches. You can walk around the tree and photograph the tree from different angles. You can even go up in a plane or something like that and photograph the tree from above. There are many ways of looking at things, many different vantage points. So I have some quite exhaustive, long videos on the New Age, but what I hope is that this dialogue that you're about to hear, if you stick around, between GT and GLS, primarily, is like another way of glimpsing this tree. And I'm really quite happy with this dialogue. As I say, I think it's the key extract in the entire book, The Gentle Traditionalist Returns, because I think in a simple, easily accessible format, it really brings out, quickly, more quick than some of my long videos, some of the very key ideas of things that I have seen about the roots, the theosophical roots of the New Age movement in Helena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey. So without further ado, I'm going to read the dialogue. It's like in a play form. GT, GLS, GT, GLS. If that's at all confusing, the dialogue will also be in print up at Substack. I'll give a link to the Substack down below. So you can just go and read along there at Substack if you want, but hopefully it won't be too unclear, and then there will be more to say after I have read the extract. Here's the dialogue. GT, you, dear chap, are more the product of the Protestant Anglosphere than you may realize, and your very Englishness has more to do with so-called New Age universalism than you readily appreciate. As I say, it doesn't look universal to me, but rather particular. Please think about that for the moment. All the key New Age texts are in English. GLS. Well, so is everything else these days. It's the world language. GT. True, but that's a fairly recent phenomenon. As recently as the 19th century, French was the international language of diplomacy, German was perhaps the premier language of science, and I don't mention the 19th century for nothing, because today's New Age thinking begins in the 19th century. It's largely due to theosophy, which started then. And theosophy was very much an English language phenomenon. You know what I mean. All those esoteric books by Alice Bailey, Annie Besant, and everything else drawing from Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. Madame Blavatsky's the grandmother of today's New Age movement, I think. GLS. She was a great leader. Not sure about grandmother, though. GT. People dispute that point. Still, it's clear to me. So much New Age dogma goes straight back to either Madame Blavatsky or her direct heir, Alice Bailey. If Blavatsky's the grandmother of the New Age, then I think Bailey is its mother, so to speak. Yawn. Whatever. If they pioneered an open-minded, universal perspective, that's good enough for me. GT, bear with me. Tell me, do you realize that back before Blavatsky, nobody in England believed the things that you do? Nobody? Oh, get real. That's GLS, obviously. GT, I assure you, I am not exaggerating. Nobody in Victorian England thought of transcending religion to achieve universal oneness. Back then, the idea of being quote-unquote spiritual but not religious would have been meaningless. Indeed, bizarre. Nor did the Victorians try to magically reorder reality through positive thinking. And nobody talked about chakras or subtle bodies or even karma and reincarnation. No one ever heard of an age of Aquarius, not to mention initiates or ascended masters living on the astral plane. And most assuredly, no one thought, quote-unquote, the Master Jesus was just a quote-unquote initiate who bore, quote-unquote, the Christ consciousness. In one form or another, all that was pioneered by theosophy. The thing is, few people these days actually read theosophy. At least, not the original authors like Blavatsky or Alice Bailey. Have you? GLS. Not really. I prefer modern stuff. Just going to make a little interjection here. So many people in the New Age scene really know nothing about Blavatsky or Bailey. They're actually very difficult authors to read. This is why all kinds of New Agers do not really know how much they're thinking, owes to Blavatsky or Bailey, because they're reading modern derivatives of Alice Bailey and Blavatsky. Anyway, back to my dialogue. GT. Most New Agers haven't read them. They're not easy authors to read. Still, theosophy gets translated into more popular, more easily digestible forms by other authors. Sometimes the Blavatsky-Bailey heritage is patent, but often the theosophical footprint goes unnoticed. And then there's another couple of characters in this dialogue. Anna piped in. And Anna, by the way, is a character who, like myself, has lived at Findhorn. You're right, GT. Most New Agers don't see their debt to theosophy. Hardly anyone at Findhorn read Bailey and Blavatsky. But although it was tough going, I actually did read them. To me, it's obvious their ideas completely shaped Findhorn. And I guess I'll just add this as well. I guess that's a little bit of, Anna's expressing my own biography there. Anna was at Findhorn, the character Anna was at Findhorn, I was at Findhorn, and I was reading these things. Anyway, GLS. Whatever. Like I say, I prefer new stuff. But if Blavatsky or Bailey open things up, good on them. GT. Well, they opened something up. That much is certain. I wouldn't like to say what, though. Pandora's box doesn't even come close. Still, I'm losing my thread. My main point is, all this is an Anglophone phenomenon. And, Ireland aside, the entire Anglosphere is steeped in Protestantism. So the New Age movement stems from a specific cultural stream. It's hardly a universal phenomenon. The early theosophists were virtually all English, or at least English speakers. People like Annie Besant, Charles Leadbeater, Alice Bailey, or her American husband Foster. The same goes for Findhorn, which has wielded such enormous influence. The Findhorn pioneers were English, Canadian, American. Likewise, the authors of your great channel texts, like Neil Donald Walsh or Helen Schuckman of A Course in Miracles, again, Americans. GLS. Aren't you forgetting something? Blavatsky was a Russian. GT. Yes, she's the exception to the rule, which proves my point. GLS. Groan. So, your scintillating point is, GT, I'm still getting to it. Back in the 19th century, Blavatsky was a Russian who spoke 7 languages, but she specifically chose to write in English. Moreover, she set off for America to found her Theosophical Society specifically there. Why English? Why America? GLS. Beats me, dude. Maybe she didn't like freezing her butt off. Maybe all those Cossacks were a drag. GT. That hardly explains the books written in English, nor the fact that Blavatsky claimed she was trained in Shigatse in Tibet by a certain Master Morya, who then sent her on a mission to America. Personally, I'm convinced there's more to this than meets the eye. GLS. Why does that not surprise me? GT. Yes, well, anyway, Blavatsky realized the detraditionalized, once Protestant, but increasingly secular Anglosphere offered unusual opportunities for her mission. It would be the world most receptive to her ideas, ideas which were, in fact, very, very Eastern, hardly universal. GLS. Oh man, you crack me up. GT. History has proved her right, I think, because other cultures never embraced her Eastern theosophy the way Anglophones did. Even today, they don't embrace the New Age the same way either. Ask Anna if you like. She's travelled the world, lived in France. Anna. That seems right. The rest of the world isn't into New Age stuff like America and England. Ireland is turning the same now, but only recently. GT. Yes, because Ireland speaks the same language. But in general, Catholic cultures never took to Eastern spirituality like the Anglosphere, just like they don't take to liberal ideology so easily. Britain, of course, was connected to the East in a special way, because her empire colonized so much of Asia, above all, India. But continental Europe never lapped up theosophy like the English. Oh sure, there were a few exceptions. Rudolf Steiner in Germany, for example, he was a theosophist for a little while, but he recognized that Christ crucified changed everything, the entire universe. So he rejected theosophy. I think that's why, even today, New Agers still tend to find Steiner's esotericism alien. Generally speaking, they mean to avoid the cross. And whatever his failings, Steiner didn't do that. GLS. Avoid the cross. Who wouldn't? But I guess you like medieval, masochistic torture instruments. Go figure. GT. Christians are called to carry the cross with our Lord. Here is Christianity's profound difference from your universal spirituality, and why it hardly seems all-embracing to me. That's why I called it particularized. You might even say provincial. It emerges from the provinces of the Protestant Anglosphere. Of course, there is that original Orientalism. Blavatsky introduced an Eastern, esoteric cosmology into English-speaking culture. Blavatsky was perfectly clear about this, as was Alice Bailey. They both claimed their esoteric Buddhism came from the same school of masters living in the Himalayas. That's why your universal New Age looks like an English-Eastern condominium to me. GLS. An English-Eastern what? GT. Well, of course, I don't mean what Americans call a condo. I mean the political sense of the word condominium. Joint rulership. That's what Blavatsky, Bailey, and their masters were aiming for. My mind reeled. So this is yet another character who's watching this all. Once more, my old skeptic rose up. I could hardly credit what GT was saying. Ruling the world, I said? Well, in a cultural sense. Yes, GT said. Blavatsky did indeed have a mission, and maybe it really was given her in Shigatz, just like she claimed. Certainly, she was incredibly well travelled, not only going to America, but also Egypt, India, the Ukraine, and Central Asia. She even wound up in Italy, fighting with Garibaldi's armies against Blessed Pius IX and the Papal States, which tells you something of her politics. Anna said, she was a very strange woman. Yes, GT said, and a formidable one, who changed the world. At any rate, her masters meant to supplant Western notions with Eastern impulses, and they wanted to substitute a syncretistic, supposedly universal spirituality for Christianity. Again, one that avoids the cross. Today, those impulses have succeeded beyond her wildest dreams. The Anglosphere is awash with Eastern ideas like never before. Okay, I said, but globalization makes that inevitable. It is more. Certainly, globalization carries Eastern influences that can't be pinned on theosophy. You only have to look at the craze for things like acupuncture, Ayurveda, yoga, Zen, Reiki, Shiatsu, Feng Shui, Tai Chi. The good Lord only knows what else. Beyond that, though, lies a prodigious, calculated agenda to negate the cross. It stems from the theosophical wellspring of the New Age movement. Looking at today's Anglosphere, Blavatsky's masters would be well pleased with all she accomplished for them. And masters? All this New Age talk of spiritual masters was just so much bunk, I thought, wasn't it? But GT implied something more substantial, indeed sinister here. Surely, I said, you're not saying these masters are real. All I'm saying is Blavatsky and Bailey were not alone, GT replied after a long pause. They certainly did their master's bidding, whoever those masters were. No, their vast, abstruse cosmology did not result from a febrile imagination, and it carries a puissant ideology that is far too worked out, too coherent, too sophisticated to write off as mere fantasy. Moreover, like Marxism say, theosophical ideology has proved incredibly enduring, still going strong after almost 150 years. Unfortunately, unlike Marxism, the ideology is never studied as such. Most academics wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. Then winking at me, he added, maybe it appears like so much bunk to them. Alas, he continued, it retains potent, concrete effects on people. It deserves study like any other system of ideas that powerfully condition masses of people. I can't easily say more. The key point is a highly Eastern, alien ideology is being seeded in the West. Alright, that is the end of the extract and Substack post. I said I was going to say a bit more about this, but having read through it all, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if I need to say much more. There is a lot packed in there. And as I say, if you want to get at all the stuff that's packed in there, you might want to go over and read it on Substack. Again, I'll give the link there down below. I'm going to go on to the personal section of this episode shortly, but maybe the only thing I feel like saying is that, well, maybe two things. First, all of this not only reflects my 20 years of deep involvement with Fintorn, with Theosophy, yes, also my engagement with Rudolf Steiner and Valentin Tomberg, but I think it also reflects the fact that by the grace of God, I have been, I am an American by birth, English parents, really I feel more English than anything, but by the grace of God, I've now lived in a number of different countries where you can really see, if you step outside the Anglosphere, if you step outside the Protestant culture, you really see that these other countries do not have this New Ageism anywhere near like is the case in America and England. So I think a lot of personal experience has gone into that. I won't labor that more. I've said it before in other episodes. And I think coming back to the sort of title of the episode, is Is Madame Blavatsky the mother of modern spirituality? Well, I think all I'm going to say there is a bit like the comment GT makes about Pandora's box. She is the mother, or the grandmother, as I put it in my text, of so much that we face in the 21st century in the New Age movement. Obviously, I'm not going to call that modern spirituality. I think that that is an incredibly grandiose, inflated term used by people who are convinced, absolutely convinced, that things like the church are irrelevant, that religions are irrelevant. Now, with modern spirituality, we're meant to transcend religion. And this was Blavatsky's message. Blavatsky's message was that it's all about, moving beyond religion. Let's be spiritual without being religious. All this we owe to Blavatsky. And yes, if you believe in modern spirituality, so-called, like Gary Lachman does, well, then she's the mother of it. I would say she's the mother or grandmother of something very, very different. But anyway, we're going to wrap up here, and I'm going to prepare to go into the more personal things that I promised at the outset. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's a few days later, and what you've just heard are the bells of Big Ben in London, because I'm recording this to you from London, England. No, not that I'm within ear range of the bells of Big Ben, but I somehow thought it was more appropriate. Those of you who know these recordings, know that I sometimes break them up with bells of a little Irish church that is in the hamlet, in the Irish village where I have been living. So you sometimes hear these church bells where I have been living in Ireland, but right now I'm in the midst of a tumultuous upheaval, a temporary, and I want to stress temporary, relocation to London. And I thought I would say a few words about that. For those of you, not everyone's going to be interested in this, I know, but some of you may have wanted to stick around to the end of the episode. There are people I know who, which is touching for me, I can tell this from the Google Analytics, faithfully, listen to these episodes to the very end and seem to be interested in things. So I thought I would just go into some personal things now that not everyone will be interested in, but if you are, here they are. Yes, so some of you also who seem to, I'm flattered and humbled by this, follow what Kim and I do, may have noticed that we've hardly been active on the internet at all, nothing on social media like Twitter, or Facebook or the Substack notes. I have been managing just about to get posts up about Substack, posts up on Substack, but it's been a real struggle to even manage that. The videos are coming out a little bit more slowly now, although I'm very much hoping there will be another one before Christmas. Because yes, our life, even though this is a temporary transition, a temporary relocation to London, it is a very great upheaval. And in the way, I'll just say this, even though it's just a temporary relocation to London, it's the beginning of some kind of new era for my wife and myself. And why I say that is that, I'll be trying to make this clear, Kim and I are very much, meaning to be able to move back to Ireland once some present trials and difficulties here in England are over. But we don't know where we'll be moving back to in Ireland, because it has been necessary. We've been renting a cottage in the north of Ireland for something like nearly 13 years now. We've been renting this cottage, and it's necessary to let that go. It's necessary to let that go. Can't afford to rent that cottage and be here in London as well. So, oh gosh, it gets complicated. But right now, as I'm recording this, we're in London. We'll be going back and forth between London and Ireland to sort of clear out all our belongings there. But let's see if I can keep this straightforward and simple. We're in the middle of this upheaval, and certain things are very, very difficult. I don't know how much it's really appropriate to say about that. There's been a death in Kim's family. Well, I think I can say it's her stepmother, a woman who married her father, obviously. Um, and there are other family difficulties here in England as well. We won't say more, but it has been necessary to sort of relocate to my wife Kim's, um, I won't say ancestral home, but because her ancestors don't come from London. But clearly, the neighbourhood is not actually the house she was born in. The house she was born in is only half a mile away, though. But the neighbourhood that Kim grew up in, and she did indeed grow up part of the time in the house in London that I'm now recording this from. So we've been, I don't want to say, well, in a sense, we've been abruptly jolted out of 13 years of life in a cottage in the rural, very, very rural north of Ireland, into London, into, the old heart of the British Empire. This tremendous center of culture, but also, it has to be said, global capitalism. There was a time, very obviously, when the peoples of this little country, England, not other little countries like Ireland, went out from this land, from this island, and conquered the world. Very obviously, you look at old maps of the 19th century, and you can see something like a quarter of the map painted pink, or in pink colors, and that quarter of the map that is in pink colors, was the British Empire. This mighty, mighty capitalist empire that was governed from London. Now, obviously, that mighty capitalist empire is no more, but London is still, one of the world's key financial centers. Certainly, and this was part of what the huge deal that around Brexit, or one of the huge deals, that the Europeans knew that London was such a key financial centre and did anything else in Europe, was anything else in Europe up to the kind of financial power of the City of London, and many European people feared that it wasn't. And how much do I bring myself in here? It does seem to me, as I've said in other episodes, that yes, continental Europe, the countries of continental Europe were never quite as good at, global world-conquering capitalism as the British were. And there's a lot we could say there. But the purpose now, and I'm saying it, I want to say it seriously, there are vast topics here about this land, England, a land of great culture, a great deal of cultural beauty, but yes, this world-conquering capitalist power. But the real point now is that Kim and I have been jolted out of rural Ireland into, what I'm calling the old heart of the British Empire. Which is still, along with, New York City, Wall Street, nowhere near as powerful as Wall Street, I suppose, but, a very, very key hub of the kind of global financial capitalist empire that now dominates the world. And to say it hasn't been easy would be an understatement. But I don't want to go into a kind of personal lamentation now of all our various woes, because there really is another side to this. I find myself thinking of Hamlet speaking about suffering the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. There is some suffering here. But I do not see this as simply outrageous fortune or a cruel twist of fate or senseless. No, I feel that there is something deeply providential deeply providential in this transition. I feel that at these times of transition, um, one can learn so much by comparing and contrasting experience, often very subtle experience. I have learned so much in my life through travel, through crossing borders. I've learned so much, for example, by going back and forth just between, Britain, England, and Ireland. Each time, I go back and forth between Britain and Ireland, I learn more. I sense more of what, the soul of Ireland is, what Ireland is, or I sense more of what the soul of England is. The comparison and the contrast is very illuminating. And yeah, I've been sort of ruminating on all of this kind of, you know, so-called slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. It seems like it's just another chapter of my life, that my life has been like this many times over the years. And I've spoken about this before, so I won't take too long with this now. But for those of you who don't know, my life radically changed when I was 16 years old, in that I'm basically English by blood. My parents were both English, and I grew up in America, and I'd never been to Europe before. And at age 16, through again a family crisis that I won't go into, my father relocated to England, and I opted to go with him. And I didn't really want to, but I won't go into all the details. At age 16, I was suddenly thrust from America into England, into Europe. And that jolting transition has shaped everything I'm saying on this channel, everything I'm saying in my books. It was painful and difficult at the time, but it has been part of Providence creating who I am today and what I have to offer. Moreover, there have been other shifts like this. When I converted to Catholicism, it was like stepping into a new universe, a new cosmos. But for me, the interesting thing is, of course, this happens for all kinds of Catholic converts. But what happened to me, and again, strange and often painful family crises were involved. I Not long after I converted to Catholicism, I ended up leaving England and going to a range of Catholic cultures, first in Germany and Switzerland. I was in central Switzerland, Lucerne, near Lucerne, which is Catholic, and then later I ended up in Ireland, France, and Spain, countries of Catholic heritage. So I guess what I'm saying here is, whereas all kinds of people convert to the new universe of Catholicism, they might be living in the same place their entire life. For me, Providence made the transition more dramatic. That I left the old kind of countries of Protestant heritage, England and America, behind, and I went out into countries of foreign languages, countries of Catholic culture. So that was another mighty transition that has shaped everything I did, because living in these countries of Catholic culture, I really did see very different they were from the Protestant world. In fact, some of the comments that I just made there about, continental Europe never quite being as good, if that's the word you want, at capitalism, as, Britain or indeed America, that's very much based on in living in various European cultures. Anyway, I've said these kinds of things before in previous episodes, and I'm not going to go into a huge, long reflection about all of that, although there is much more I could say. I think what I want to say, just speaking personally, is that this transition is, in some senses, different from what I've mentioned, in that it's not a transition into the unknown, into the jolting, shocking unknown. And it is just a temporary relocation to London, but nonetheless, it does feel quite shocking and jolting in one sense, very much does. But it also does feel like a new era in our lives, because the old era, this 13 years that we, or nearly 13 years that we rented this cottage, in the north of Ireland. Has come to an end. We're not going to be living, in that little Catholic village where you heard the church bells that I've been speaking about anymore. We will be somewhere else in Ireland, and right now, I have very little idea where. It's like Kim and I are going through this tunnel. Um, Birth canal maybe. There's intense labor here, and we don't know where we're coming out. We sense really light at the end of the tunnel. I won't go into all the reasons about that. We sense that certain things that have been very, very difficult for us recently uh, should be coming to an end somewhat. I really don't know if I want to get too personal here. So there is light at the end of this tunnel, but we do not know, where in Ireland we emerge from this tunnel. So that is giving you some kind of little update for anyone who is interested. Maybe I'll take this point to just make a couple of apologies. I am tremendously slow at getting back to people, good people at the moment. I'm going to be even slower in responding to comments at YouTube. My life is in real upheaval. Everything is coming out more slowly, which is why I've not been at all present, on social media, and the episodes are coming out a little bit more slowly as well. So I'm glad I was able to get this out, and this is done by voice. Voice is definitely easier for me in these circumstances. The camera episodes, I've said this before, they take me forever, particularly the editing of the camera episodes. That said, I am very much hoping that before Christmas there will be one more camera episode that was largely, if not entirely, filmed back in the spring. It's an episode about Anglo-American cultural dominance. I don't expect it to be that popular an episode. It could really be quite controversial for some people. Yes, speaking about the implications of Anglo-American world-conquering capitalism and world-conquering soft culture. Yeah, not necessarily the most popular of episodes, but a lot of work has been going into this, yes, especially with the editing. Um, Maybe I just say this, as I say, I hope to get it out before Christmas. Um, but this episode, although it's not primarily an Irish episode, it does have a fair amount to say about Ireland. In fact, earlier this year there was a preview. There was a preview of this episode. The preview was Catholic Ireland Murdered? So that preview was highlighting the Irish aspects of this episode, but as I say, the episode is more than just about Ireland. It's about Anglo-American cultural power. But it has very much an Irish theme. And yes, some of you who are really paying attention to this channel, those of you who are, may remember that I brought out this episode, was Catholic Ireland Murdered? A preview. I never was able to follow through with it by getting the entire episode out. But I very much pray that before Christmas, I will manage to get it edited, and it's one of these episodes with lots and lots of images, lots and lots of titles. I hope that will be out as well. And again, yes, what forms this, somewhat controversial and I think unpopular episode, which will not be everyone's cup of tea, about Anglo-American cultural and capitalist power, carrying with it, it has to be said, anti-Catholic themes that are really at the heart of Protestant England and Protestant America. The cultural Protestant heritage there, what Charles Coulombe calls Puritan's empire, when he's speaking about America. Yeah, well, the episode is all about those kinds of things. And again, it's an episode that's, I could never have made. I could never have made had I not been through these kinds of jolting transitions, from America to England and then England to other Catholic cultures in Europe. This is part of what shaped me. This is part of what I do, what I live. And so, even though this latest transition is not as shocking, it still feels to me like part of Providence. I somehow feel and believe that I'm going to be deepening my understanding, not only of England, but because in this whole process, we do need to go back and forth between England and Ireland, and when the whole process is finished, we'll be searching for, a new place to live in Ireland. Um, there'll be a lot of going back and forth inevitably, and I somehow feel and trust that all of this is going to be deepening my understanding of what I will dare to call the soul of Ireland, the soul of England. Um, and yes, I think I've really got to begin drawing this to a close. But it does seem to me that we are given providential experiences for all kinds of different reasons. For whatever reason, I have been given these experiences of different cultures and countries within Europe. I've never really been out of Europe hardly at all, or I've never been out of the West. Um, um, People have different experiences. There's a lot I find myself thinking about there. In fact, I find myself, there's a set of threads there to do with Hilaire Belloc, who far more than me, far more than me, but had similar experiences. He traveled a great deal within the West. I mean, he actually did manage to get outside the West. He certainly went to, North Africa and Islamic culture as well. But he married an Irish American, which meant that in the 1890s, he traveled through America a fair amount, and the fact that he was married to an Irish American, would have brought America into his whole awareness as well, quite apart from the fact that, he went out and married her in America. And went to America a great deal. Belloc's writings, are also based on his own providential journey of being thrust between cultures. This includes actually the fact that when he was very young, he was born in France of a French father and an English mother, and the Prussian War in 1870, invading France, meant that as he was something like 2 months old, he had to be taken to England. In fact, his family escaped on the last train leaving Paris. Apparently, as the train was pulling out of Paris, the Germans were already covering the tracks so that no more trains could escape Paris. So Belloc's life, to a far greater extent than mine actually, was forged by going back and forth between European cultures. That's a great part of what his work about Europe is about. For those of you who know his book, Europe and the Faith, and I cannot help feeling my debt to Belloc on this channel is absolutely enormous, far beyond anything I can name for you. But somehow I feel that by the grace of God, by divine providence, I have also been given these kinds of transitions between different cultures and countries within the West, between Europe and America, for a purpose to sort of learn and deepen my understanding about these. I think I've really got to finish. I'm sort of finishing this rather abruptly. So much more might be said, but these are things, ladies and gentlemen, emerging in my soul as I'm still a bit shook up here. You find that you get very shaken up, being uprooted. It's disorienting, and it's demanding, but it's throwing up things that I think are eventually going to really prove to be of value in my work and on this channel. And yes, I think I've given you ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who are interested, some kind of further update. There'll be another big episode from me, hopefully, if I get it edited out before Christmas. That also, even though most of it was filmed months ago, also explores these same themes to an extent. Yeah, again, I'm aware it won't be the most popular of episodes, but it felt like it was important for me to do. And I think that's all I'm really going to say for now. I'm still really having trouble keeping up with things, keeping up in touch with people. If you want news of me, I'm not really going to be, much on social media or X. I am managing to keep up the Substack posts. I'm barely managing to keep up the Substack posts. But yes, I'm posting, every week, or maybe sometimes it's every 10 days or so. Kim and I are posting on Substack. So for those of you who are interested, you can find out more over at Substack. And yes, I think that's all I'm going to say now. If you got this far to the end of this episode, thank you for listening. And yes, please say a prayer for us. It's a demanding time. That's all I'm going to say for now. Except thank you for listening, and God bless you all.